They thought he needed support to stand until his posture froze the entire ceremony. The square was alive with rhythm. Drums rolled in perfect cadence, boots struck the pavement in sync, and banners fluttered against the clear morning sky. It was the kind of day built for ceremony, sunlight catching the brass of instruments, children waving flags too large for their hands, veterans seated in neat rows near the front. And then there was him. He arrived late, moving slowly through the crowd, leaning heavily on a wooden cane. The cane itself looked unremarkable, scarred, chipped, the varnish worn away by time. His jacket was plain, collar frayed, shoes polished but old. People parted for him, but not out of respect. They stepped aside with smirks and muttered comments. Look at him, still trying to play soldier. Bet he can barely stand through the anthem. Cane probably holds him up more than his legs. The whispers were cruel, but not loud enough to be challenged. In the noise of the parade, cruelty hides easily. He ignored them all. His pace was slow but deliberate. Each tap of the cane against the stone echoed louder than the chatter. He found his place at the very edge of the square, where the line of sunlight fell across the pavement, and settled there. The ceremony pressed on. The announcer's voice carried over loudspeakers, reading the names of honored guests, listing dates and battles that half the crowd had already forgotten. Children grew restless. Flags drooped in the heat, but the man with the cane stood silently, his shoulders slouched just enough to invite more whispers. His hat shaded most of his face, but his jawline trembled faintly, betraying age. No medal shone on his chest. To the crowd, he was just another relic, clinging to ceremony with the fragile support of a stick. A group of teenagers near the back snickered openly. One mimicked his shuffle, dragging an imaginary cane. Their laughter rippled outward until even some adults smiled nervously. The old man didn't flinch. Then the anthem began. Drums silenced. The brass section swelled. Voices rose as the first notes echoed through the square. Every head turned toward the flag, lifted high on its pole, waving in the morning light. Soldiers snapped to attention. Veterans pushed themselves upright with varying effort. And slowly the old man reached for his cane. The crowd expected him to lean heavier, to struggle for balance. Instead, he placed the cane carefully at his side. His fingers released their grip, and then, in one motion smoother than anyone imagined possible, he straightened. Labech, his spine rose like iron. Shoulders locked back, chest expanded. His chin lifted, eyes forward. The tremble in his jaw vanished. The slouch dissolved into discipline. In the space of a breath, weakness evaporated, and what remained was a silhouette the crowd recognized instantly, not of an old man, but of a soldier. Gasps rippled through the square. One by one, conversations died. Children tugged at their parents, asking why everyone was staring. Even the teenagers who mocked him fell silent, their smirks fading into wide-eyed shock. The anthem continued, but the true focus of the square had shifted. He wasn't holding on to the cane. The cane had been holding on to him. Jonas Hale, drifting again with his ever-present camera, caught the moment through his lens. He zoomed in, capturing the transformation frame by frame. The cane rested useless at the man's side, but the man himself stood taller than the flagpole. Jonas whispered into his mic, "Who is he?" The anthem reached its peak. Trumpets blared, voices swelled, and through it all, the man remained unmoving, posture perfect, as if carved from stone. His presence eclipsed the ceremony itself. It didn't matter who spoke next, or what names were read. Every eye in the square was locked on him. And in that silence, respect bloomed, not demanded, not announced, but earned in a single gesture. When the final note rang out and the crowd lowered their heads, he did not sit, he did not rest, he simply remained at attention. And those close enough to see swore they spotted something carved faintly into the wood of his cane. Letters, worn but legible, a call sign. If you want to keep these stories alive, subscribe now and join us for the next one. They thought the cane held him up, but when he let it go, the entire square realized it was his discipline holding him all along. For a moment after the anthem ended, no one moved. The drums, silent. The horns, hushed. Only the breeze stirred the flags overhead, snapping them to attention as if imitating the man below. The old soldier remained perfectly upright, body rigid, gaze forward. His cane rested forgotten against his thigh, balanced on its own as though unwilling to betray him. The crowd's eyes darted between the flag and the man, unsure which deserved their loyalty first. Children whispered questions. Parents offered no answers. Veterans clenched their jaws, each of them recalling a posture they had once carried but no longer could. Jonas's camera didn't waver. He zoomed closer until the grain of the man's jacket filled the frame. Then the cane, its wood dark, polished smooth by decades of use. Jonas squinted. Along the shaft beneath the man's knuckles, something faintly gleamed. Letters, carved deep but worn shallow with time. He adjusted focus. The letters resolved. RF. 2 initials. Simple. But the crowd didn't see them. Only Jonas did, and through his lens the carving felt heavier than words. Initials weren't decoration. They were identity. The silence broke with the announcer's voice trembling now. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing." It was unnecessary. No one had dared to sit. The next segment of the ceremony began, reading the names of squadrons long since retired, honoring flights that never returned. One by one, the announcer recited dates, missions, code names, and still the old man held posture, as if time itself bent to his command. In the crowd, a ripple of recognition spread. Older veterans began to salute, not toward the flag, but toward him. They didn't speak his name. They didn't need to. Their trembling hands rose, some with difficulty, some through tears. Respect radiated outward like concentric rings, each gesture infecting the next until the entire front row stood saluting one man who hadn't asked for it. Jonas whispered into his recorder. "The ceremony has shifted. He's become the center." The teenagers who mocked him earlier fell utterly silent. Their smirks had dissolved, replaced with shame. One of them, no older than 16, tugged at his father's sleeve. "Dad, who is he?" The father shook his head slowly, his eyes fixed. "Someone the sky hasn't forgotten." One gesture had turned a crowd into witnesses. The announcer's voice faltered as he continued the program. One gesture had turned a crowd into witnesses. The announcer's voice faltered as he continued the program. He stumbled over the name of one squadron. The 14th Reconnaissance Flight. His throat caught. Several veterans in the crowd stiffened. Jonas caught it immediately. Reconnaissance, the initials carved into the cane. RF coincidence? Or memory carved into wood? He panned his lens upward again. The old man hadn't moved, but his lips pressed into a thinner line, jaw set, as though he too had heard the name, and was answering with silence. The drums resumed, beating slow, heavy. Soldiers marched across the square, boots striking in perfect rhythm. Yet even they faltered, glancing toward the solitary figure who stood taller than the uniformed rows. Discipline doesn't fade, it radiates, and in that moment every trained eye recognized it. Jonas scribbled notes furiously. If he's 14th Recon, that squadron disappeared. No official record after 72. How is he here? This wasn't just another veteran standing through the anthem. This was someone who carried unfinished history in his bones. A hush swept again as the flag began its descent, lowered carefully at the close of ceremony. Normally applause erupted at this point, but today the square remained silent. Eyes stayed locked on him. Even the announcer chose not to break the spell. As the fabric folded, the old man finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he bent, not with frailty, but with precision, and picked up his cane. He gripped it once more, but this time differently, not for support, but like a baton, an extension of command. And then, to the astonishment of everyone present, he struck it against the ground, once, twice, 3 times. Aviva! The sound carried louder than the drums had, sharper than the horns. Veterans froze. Jonas zoomed in. The initials on the cane caught sunlight for a brief second, RF shining as if alive. The old man lifted his chin higher, and for the briefest moment Jonas swore he heard the faint echo of aircraft overhead, not from the current air show, but from decades past, a phantom formation saluting its commander. The square stood still, breaths held as if awaiting his command, and in that silence, the man whispered something under his breath, too soft for anyone but Jonas's microphone to catch. 2 words, still here. Rin, steady twello at rizzle steady, Mosser Apel, Pretullo de larg the white, 85 results or more. They mocked his cane, but when it struck the ground, even the drums dared not compete. Red legat, bicken blok stated as, the wall de benocht across the square, sharper than any command barked through a loudspeaker. 1 strike, 2, 3. Each blow seemed to ripple outward, bouncing off the stone buildings, rattling the flags in their brackets. Soldiers froze mid-step, veterans stiffened. Even the announcer's microphone squealed once, as if the sound had overloaded the air itself. And then silence, thick, absolute, reverent. The old man stood taller than before, cane pressed firmly into the earth like a marker of territory. His breath was steady, controlled. The crowd no longer saw frailty. They saw command, the residue of authority that time itself could not erode. Jonas's camera caught every tremor of the moment. His hands shook, not from nerves but from awe. He zoomed close, focusing again on the initials carved into the cane. RF. They glowed under sunlight, etched by hand but heavy with meaning. He whispered into his recorder. RF, 14th Reconnaissance Flight. It has to be. But they were erased. A veteran broke the silence first. He stepped forward from the front row, spine bent but salute sharp. His hand trembled in the air, but his eyes locked on the old man with unshakable respect. Another followed, then another. Soon the entire line of veterans stood saluting, not the flag, not the officials on the stage, but the man with the cane. The crowd followed instinct. Hats came off, murmurs fell quiet. Children clung to their parents, sensing something sacred without understanding why. The announcer didn't speak. He lowered his microphone and bowed his head. Wan sula niken wat his akadisestani. They weren't saluting what he was. They were saluting what he carried. I walk he played he didn't parted bulhirio. I walk he played in gol mute streecher let heroes have rechenan greet he too. Loker riping pausiction parts in it planed papping play 2 arcing played. But not originally bid bet is re, that nazaramenti better from the ended, what they were in second al formula block though. He remained at attention, jaw set, posture carved from memory. Only his eyes moved, slowly sweeping the crowd, as if scanning a formation, counting each one of them like soldiers on a roll call. Jonas filmed every second. Through his lens he noticed something strange, the man's lips moving again. He leaned close to the mic, straining. The words were faint. You're still flying. Jonas's chest tightened. Was he speaking to the veterans, to the crowd, or to ghosts only he could see? When the last drumbeat of the ceremony faded, the man finally reached for his cane again. This time he gripped it firmly, not as weakness but as ritual. He turned slowly, pivoting with the precision of a parade ground maneuver, and began to walk away. No one stopped him. The crowd parted like water, creating a path. Soldiers lowered their eyes. Veterans wiped tears without shame. Jonas followed, camera rolling but careful to keep his distance. The man's steps were slow, deliberate, cane striking the ground in rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Each strike still echoed like an order. At the edge of the square he paused. Without turning he lifted the cane once more and rested it on his shoulder like a rifle. The gesture was fluid, practiced. For one instant the years seemed to peel away, and the silhouette before them was not an old man but a young pilot reporting for duty. And then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd and the quiet streets beyond. Jonas stopped recording. He lowered the camera, his breath shallow. He replayed the footage on his monitor. Frame by frame the cane filled the screen, and there, just beneath the initials RF, another faint carving became visible under the glare of sunlight. A date, barely legible, 1972, the exact year the 14th Reconnaissance Flight vanished from all official records. Jonas leaned back, chills racing across his arms. The old man hadn't spoken his name. He hadn't needed to. The cane had spoken for him. He opened his notebook and wrote 3 words beneath the initials. Still here. Malavive is bepertutude. They mocked his cane, but when he stood at attention the world remembered what it tried to forget. And sometimes the simplest sound, 3 strikes against stone, can echo louder than history itself. As Jonas closed his notebook, the faintest sound drifted on the wind. 3 knocks, hollow, distant, impossible, yet unmistakable. The same rhythm, the same message, the same unfinished story.